What is wrong with my Africa? I don't understand. I don't get it. I'm leaving it. I don't care.
Like a strange jelly bean.
It does.
What happened here?
Do you know what this is?
It's Africa.
Yes, but
Somewhere
there's
in
a
Africa.
specific spot right here. This is where the first human came from. They started, shooting out in different locations. Some went over this way. Some kind of went up here and just stuck around. There's a very important part right here. There was the first human civilization. The very first civilization was called Mesopotamia. There was a very popular thing they did here in Mesopotamia, and that was the Code of Hammurabi. Do you know what that is?
No.
Okay, well, have you ever heard the phrase eye for an eye? But this Hammurabi dude decided that the way things should run, and this was the first law, if you do something bad and step your toe out of line, the person you hurt gets to hurt you the same way, sort of. So, let's assume, I guess eye for an eye would be, if you shoot someone, I mean, guns weren't invented at this time, mind you, but this is a more modern example. If you shoot somebody in the eye, they, in turn, would be able to shoot you in the eye. If you murdered their son, they get to publicly execute yours,
Jesus Christ.
So it was like eye for an eye.
Public executions of children.
Hey man, that was eye for an eye situation.
Do you think they had licenses for that? I don't think that's
License to kill, James Bond. You have these people over here in China, they start doing these dynasty type things and creating all these rulers and whatnot, and they have this thing called the Mandate of Heaven. Can you infer what a Mandate of Heaven is?
Maybe because like some people used to believe that like the king was like
You're on it. You're getting there.
a representative of God that God had sent, something like that, where like it was a person that God had sent to like represent him.
Yeah, there you go. That was if someone had the Mandate of Heaven, they were allowed to be the ruler. And these people, can you take a guess at who they were?
The communists.
No, they weren't communists. We're not quite there yet. The Mongolians.
Mongolian? What the Mongolian doing here? Hey, you Mongolian! Don't you break down my wall!
You know what the Mongols are known for?
I think my granddad told me about these once. But they were like a tribe, and they were like quite violent.
So the Chinese people invented a solution.
They wanted to start a war and murder them all. They tried to surrender by giving them stuff, like being like, "Hey,
not
here,
quite.
have some."
No, they weren't there yet. Now you might have heard of a nice little monument that still partially exists today. This little thing right here.
That's the Great Wall of China, isn't it?
There you go. Now you're getting it. You want to see what the problem is with the Great Wall of China? The way they built the wall is there was slots in it where there just wasn't stuff. So what they would do is after signaling that they were about to attack by burning corpses of the deceased and firing, flaming arrows, they decided, all right, what we're going to do is we're just going to go all the way around, take over all this. That's exactly what they did. And they ended up taking over a lot of it eventually. So, they got a lot of area, and they decided that wasn't enough. So eventually, the Mongols owned all of Asia. And then, they still decided, you know what? That's not quite enough, because they had all this land. What can you do with land if it has no value? What they decided is that there's all these rich people here, and they're realistic about it. They realized, hey, we're not going to be able to take everything now. Do you know how you pay for something or get something you want without actually buying it if you don't have money? You know what you typically do?
You steal it.
Bruh.
Not stealing.
No. Trade.
Trade, yes. Trade.
I don't steal anything. Don't inform the police, please.
they decided to set up a nice little path of trade routes. They call this the Silk Road. Meanwhile, over here in Japan, while all that's going on, there's a bunch of people that didn't want any part of the Mongols. They decided they're just going to swoop over it. It basically came down to the people in charge were the people commanding the wars. The government essentially became kind of useless, so we're going to kind of scribble that out. So that's Japan kind of settled. So you had the Brits coming over here, and they started settling in. But the main group that was big at this time was mainly over here, Slavs. They are what become eventually the Russians up here.
What, is there a lot of sheep here?
I said there's a lot of people that thought sheep were attractive.
Oh!
We didn't really know what this place was yet.
When DreamWorks made that movie.
Yeah, then finally in 2010, you know, some very, very, very small select few people from that long time ago when they started branching out from right around here, they decided to come all the way up through here. For some reason, it was really, really cold. And over time, there's this little bridge. Now, this is a theory. It's not 100% factual. These boys found a road. So, they followed that road, and they spread all over. Let's skip ahead to the year 0.
What was happening then?
Somewhere around, like, this area right here. I know it's a huge generalization. There's one little country. Basically, a lot of people went to here. And this was, like, the Holy Land. Everyone loved this.
Wait, can I, before you say the story, can I quickly give you a little theory of mine?
Yes.
I think, so, people say that Mary was a virgin. She never had sex with anybody. God gave her the baby Jesus, right?
Yes.
So then she was like, Joseph, I'm pregnant, but we haven't had sex. It's from God. So then everyone believed that the baby was from God because she was like, oh, we've never had sex. It's a God baby.
I have a theory.
So I think that Mary had some explaining to do, and she's been knocked up by the fella next door.
That's very true.
She's not wanting to tell Joseph. She's like, oh, it's the son of God. It's God sending this. I haven't been cheating on you. So then everyone just believed it from there on.
Now, can you tell what baby this may be? He's kind of an important figure.
This is Jesus Christ.
It sure is. So, some medieval stoner named Jesus Christ was chilling out, and someone walks up to him, possibly someone who knew his mother, and was like, "Hey, wait a minute, are you the son of God?" Yeah, you're the person who is you're immaculately conceived. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That the guy. And then a bunch of other people overheard. There's even one dude that's just kind of crawling around a bush here, not even knowing what the going on. He's wondering, like, wait a minute, is this really him? So he's going around, walking around like, yeah, I'm him and all, and thinking he's all cool. And telling people he is, and this is an important word, the Messiah. And he's going to save them all. He's free of sin. He'll grant them any wish they want. He's magic. He can even do a bunch of cool party tricks. He can take this cheap glass of garbage, and he can turn it into something pristine, some liquid gold as they liked at the time, some wine. People thought that was phenomenal. So, since he had that one little party trick, everyone was like, oh my god, he ain't kidding. And the Romans get word of this. Well, this is a real problem, because there's this religion that already exists, and it's Judaism. People that live in Judea, it's their way of life, and that's how they went about being brought into this world. And they're like, well, they say this god dude had a son, and we're not sure if we should believe that, or if this guy really is him. I mean, he can do this cool party trick, but I watched a YouTube video, and it kind of debunked it. I don't know if I believe this guy, man. They were like, okay, we don't really believe this dude, but still, this major 30% of the population still thought it was. And they're like, okay, we really got to deal with this. What the Romans would do when they really just didn't like someone, they had these giant sticks they'd put in the ground, and they were this shape right here, because what they would do is they'd put people's arms on some of them. So they really did not like the fact that this dude was causing such a disturbance. They decided to take care of that problem. Years like 33 AD or 35, one of the two. I think 33 AD. And so this 33-year-old guy was killed.
Cheer up, Brian. You know what they say? Some things in life are bad. They can really make you mad. Other things just make you swear and curse.
And after he actually died, they were like, okay, well, we don't want to take up all this precious space. And some people, out of curiosity, some of the Romans who had second thoughts, and they were like, all right, well, let's move this boulder to the side here. They went to the tomb, and they're like, wait a minute. And some guy, he's real ghosty and stuff. He decides to kind of fly in, and he's like, all right, you see, one of those people. You see, I warned you at dinner the other night. One of you would betray me.
Betrayal.
So one of you guys did. I'm dead now, but I'm not actually dead. I kind of respond. I need you guys to carry out a task for me, or else my spirit will never lay to rest. He wanted them to spread the word of Christianity, to stop the ignorance, I guess, and spread the teachings of how human life can actually be bettered through Christianity. Alright, and as a result, this little tiny forgotten about area of the world has some new ideas that are kind of controversial. People start believing it. And eventually, all of Europe starts to transition into a primarily Christian, mostly Catholic type place. So it's like a DLC expansion to the Jewish religion. One guy had a very critical review of it. One dude around here in Germany, he really didn't like Catholicism at all. He thought it was way too strict. So he wrote a whopping 95 different reasons why this sucks. F you. F you. F you. You're cool. F you. I'm out. And this is the Protestant Reformation. And he decided that, you know what, instead of having these strict rulers that dictate everything in all of Europe, why not have our own freedom? Because this is such a large book with controversial ideas, surely some people are not going to agree on everything. Now, this is the first, I believe, the first campaign in the Christian saga. There's these big players in the game of, we need to spread this. They decided that Europe was just simply not enough. They needed more. One dude who was really into trade, he lived right around here. He thought this place was so cool, and they have the most killer cinnamon rolls. He really liked Indian cinnamon rolls. He was like, I need to get that cinnamon. So he goes up to the queen, and the queen's like, how you doing, chap? Even though he's not British. And he's like, all right, so if you pay for the ship and the journey and the men and my food and my entire trip and give me a bunch of money and let me go do whatever I want, basically run off money and basically steal everything I want, I will find a way. And so they say outright, they're tempted. They said no, and he asks again. And eventually one day they're like, you know what? If you will literally leave alone. So he goes over.
Is that actually what they did? They just said yeah because he kept asking.
He decides he's gonna sail down around here, but he has a theory. What if instead of going that way?
Okay, new theory.
What if the Earth actually goes around like this, and we can get to India? And so they're like, okay, well, we'll let you take a chance at that. But little does he know, there's actually this big motherfucker right here. They hit a roadblock and they're like, bruh, we're here early. They were like, okay, well, I guess we're in India now. He runs home, he's like, won't believe what I found. And the so-called Indians, which were Native Americans that they weren't quite aware about at the time, they're like, oi mate, what are you doing? Get off our property. And they're like, hostile, bro. They try to make peace. They're like, alright, so if this is how it's really gonna be, then fine, so be it. We just want to trade with you guys. And I'm like, oh, okay, Indians like to trade. So they grabbed some really cool tools that I mentioned earlier. They're kind of shaped like this. What else? Like, okay. So, what if we are sick of waiting for our supplies, and instead, now, hear me out, we instead take these boys and do some extra convincing? And all the other people are like, man.
What an excellent idea that is.
Exactly.
Wow, this is fantastic! Why, this could be the most important discovery since air.
After Christopher Columbus decided to sail out, they realized all the untapped potential in this giant continent. Absolutely enormous. And they get to a down around here, they start killing people and like that, and they get to one area, and they meet some really cool people, the Aztecs. And they're like, huh, you're kind of rich. And they make friends with them. And eventually one day, the king is like, of the Aztecs is like, all right, you're cool, come on in. And they're like, sweet. And instead of having a nice little dinner party, they take swords with them and kill everyone and steal their gold.
We're pieces of...
Oh, trust me, there's more coming. Eventually, some of these people from around this area decide that, you know what, this Catholic rule and stuff like that, it's really getting to be too much. So a few years later, anyway, they come over here to Plymouth Rock. They're chilling out. Indians are like, hey, what's up? And they're like, hey, buddies. And they actually make peace, and they celebrate the first Thanksgiving together. And they're sharing food, eating corn, you know, giving each other nice old pats on the back, making toast. But anyway, we eventually take over this area, and it's the 13 colonies. And the people that really stake the claim, because they're the first ones there, are the British. So they control these colonies, and they're considered British colonies. These farmers down here, in particular, they decide we need a little extra hand in the labor force. So they create this thing called the triangular trade. So basically what would happen is people here in the new colonies, after arriving here, they would get all these nice exports and stuff like that, sell it back to Britain, they would keep it. As a result, they would take that money, they would go here into Africa and all these countries here, pay off kings and stuff to sell their peasants and lower class families just trying to make a job, and they would send it to the colonies to be slaves. And that was called the triangular trade. All that's going on is getting kind of brutal. The world's gaining a bit of tension, I suppose. And things are getting tense in just about every country. So you got these American colonists here, and they realize how much money they could be making if, in this triangular trade, why don't they just kind of eliminate the middleman? These boys don't like that. So some of the royal guard comes over, and they like, all right, we're gonna stand guard at all these different places. They get kind of riled up about something. It's the middle of winter, so there's a lot of snow on the ground. And one of them, in a fit of rage, picks a rock up off the ground. And it is covered in snow, so he disguises it as a snowball.
Would you two please stop throwing snowballs?
What it does is it takes one of these guards, smacks him clear in the face, and obviously a consequence of that is there's going to be blood. And that's not good.
Yeah.
So, instinctively, there's this really cool invention that the British have, gun. Now, what they did with these guns is they decided to defend themselves, and they started firing. So people start finding out about this. One day, in protest, not long after, these people disguised themselves as Native Americans, calling themselves Indians. They gave themselves some big mohawks. They call this event the Boston Tea Party. Do you know what the Boston Tea Party is?
Nope, never heard of it.
Basically, one of the shipments came in the dock at night, and these boys started yeeting it. The British wake up the next morning, and they're wondering why the water looks like this. Okay? Like, huh. Now that's kind of weird. They go and check on the shipments.
I have killed a few people when I have had a lack in my teeth.
They find out in the morning that this boat right here has nothing on it, and their immediate reaction is,
What in the goddamn?
they find out what the real cause of it is, and old King over here, he gets pissed.
You maniacs! You blew it up!
Some cool boys form a super secret cool kids club, but they realize that all these pieces of paper and stuff that they're writing out here, these documents, Declaration of Independence, everything, kind of useless if they don't have a military. They start gathering all these people with the help of people like Paul Revere called the Minutemen. Thomas Jefferson wrote the lines on this paper. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." What that basically means is, hey, Britain. Yes, that's basically what is going on. These people get a lot of time to prepare, and this dude, he's kind of late, but he talks to his friend. Light one lamp if they decide to, you know, come in here and invade by land, and if they send out a bunch of people this way, 2 lamps, 2 by sea. So it turns out it is by sea, as a matter of fact, and he puts up the 2 lamps, and he starts riding his horsey around all throughout the area. He starts going to people's doors, telling them the British are coming. The Brits here finally pull in, and there's like 300 minutes. But in the front, the leader of the Minutemen tells them to stand their ground, don't move. That's exactly what they do. Finally, one dude, his gun misfires. That bullet itself would forever change European and world history. So
it was an accident.
Yes, an accident started the war.
Jesus Christ.
Yes, it was a gun misfire. What the French do is they start sending guns over here as this war is going on because the French can handle it. They're a pretty good militia. And even though in a realistic scenario, the Brits would, if, you know, it was 300 colonists here, they would have taken that in, you know, 2 days, for example. Sending people here for weeks on end so far away costs them tons and tons and tons of money. Basically, after a long time of fighting, a few years, British people were like, all right, you know what? Have your land, bigots. So these people get independence, and they got to worry about living on their own and making their own laws. So a few years down the line, after a lot of debate of whether or not they should have a monarch where there's a very strong ruler, or if they should split it up and have a bunch of people rule, and this talks about how they rule. So everything starts going smooth. People start colonizing out here. Some people named Lewis and Clark meet up with some chick. They go out. They buy a bunch of land, explore all this area and stuff. It's debatable whether or not slavery is okay or not. They have free states and they have slave states, and it's kind of a 50-50 split. Every new state that gets added, one's a free state, one's a slave state. They get a new one, one's a free state, they get a new one, one's a slave state. They alternate and alternate and alternate. If, under this new constitution, it gets equal or unbalanced against their favor, that they'll eventually lose the right to have their slaves. Meanwhile, over here, Africa starts to split up into some of its more known countries today. So Australia, finally discovered. New Zealand, not quite yet. Still don't really know it exists yet. It's the last one. Over here in China, there's a lot of reforms that end up going on. It's not your traditional Chinese dynasty as it used to be, kind of. Now, in the 1800s, all right, so we have this one building here. We still use it today. Very popular building, and this is the President's House. Do you know what it's called?
The White House.
Yes, the White House. Now, for some reason...
Is it still the same? Is it the exact same bricks and everything?
Well, you see, here's why it's not the exact same brick. What happened is these Brits, they were very upset that they lost the war. And in 1812, they saw that this White House had been built, and they were like, okay, well, what if you didn't? And so they got some people over there with some nice little things called explosives, and they just decided to blow the out of it. So we have a lot of land. With that land, it gets debated whether or not slavery is okay. And after a bunch of different conflicts, we decide that it almost becomes a split. That is not at all how it's divided up, but it's a 50-50 split on whether or not slavery is okay.
Was this the Civil War?
Yes. He eventually unites all of us. A famous actor, he is not a fan of the fact that they lost. He was a very proud Southerner. So one day, Abraham Lincoln decides, hey, I'm going to go watch a movie in the theater. And this actor, he actually whips out a .22 revolver and decides to cap his ass in the back of the head. Russia decides they are getting sick of tsardom. Meanwhile, there's a really important political figure. He lives right around here, and his name is Franz Ferdinand. Do you know who this guy is?
Ooh, yep, he gets shot.
Alright, so this Franz Ferdinand dude, he's just kind of chilling. He's got his lady over here. He's like, oh, Franz, I'm so in love with you. Isn't everything so great? You're the Archduke and all. And over here, there's this one building. On top of that building, there's another dude. And that man is carrying something that is a very controversial item. He decides that this Archduke guy needs to go.
There was already a lot of tension between all the countries, so when...
That's what started it.
Yeah, when the Archduke was killed, that sort of set it off. And then, since it was like Austria and Hungary had an alliance with Germany, that pulled Germany in.
Something very interesting was going on here in Russia.
Oh yeah, the royal family, the whole royal family was just murdered. They got the whole royal family in a room, and they thought that there was like... It was some sort of emergency. They just got the whole family in one room together, and they just shot them all.
Yeah, they started killing and chopping heads and stuff. These people here, they form a revolution, overthrow the Tsar, and they decide there's a new form of government we want to try out. There is one real old guy here, and his name was Karl Marx. One dude who was a real fan of it, name was Vladimir Lenin, or Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov. And they formed the USSR, and they decide that all these neighboring countries ought to join too. This is a huge problem because this completely contradicts what's going on over here when you have people like John D. Rockefeller, who is a pro-capitalist, who believes that money should be, you know, you earn it or you don't. Over here, they think everything should be shared. As a result of war reparations and stuff like that, and a lot of countries falling into poverty, they slowly start to think the only option is to resort to communism. So in a nice little country called Germany, who just paid war reparations for World War I and got blamed for the entire thing, they're pretty angry. And there's one man, for some reason, he has some extreme political ideas that people are really on board with. Not really too sure why, but people absolutely adore him. He joins the Nazi Party, which at the time is just like a workers' union, and he starts rallying and climbing political ranks, and eventually he's put in prison. While he was in prison, decided to write Mein Kampf, and a lot of people agreed with it. So you had Germany in the middle. It was like,
I'm just a poor boy, nobody loves me.
He's just a poor boy from a poor family, sparing his life from this monstrosity.
Easy come, easy go, will you let me go?
people over here and people over here, they were all saying, you know, like,
Bismillah, no, we will not let you go. Let him go!
Oh, mamma mia, mamma mia.
Mamma mia, let me go. Beelzebub has a devil put aside for me, for me, for me.
And eventually we chase him back into where Germany is, until eventually we dethrone Hitler, and suddenly he one day ups and vanished, to later for Stalin to claim to have the head of him, which was turned out to be a lie, and we just think he killed himself. So in order to not get these two massive superpowers fighting because of the nuclear arms race after we started nuking people over in Japan, we decided the best course of action would be fighting little proxy wars. So being the homies we are, we take the boys, we decide to go over this way, fly out some troops, we decide to get involved with a war that isn't even ours, and we station ourselves here, fight a bunch of wars, decide to make sure, you know, communism stays out. Realize that it's a really bad idea because China threatens to kill all of us if we don't leave, pull out of the war, and that's a problem, that's a huge loss. Meanwhile, after following the Vietnam War, there was this one president, and his name is Richard Nixon. He was really worried that the opposing political party, they were trying to overthrow him or plot against him. So he found where their headquarters was, and it was a hotel down here called the Watergate Hotel. And he hired some people to go outside this hotel down here, and he wanted them to commit the very, very illegal crime of loitering. They weren't just loitering. What they did is they had these people out here.
Sounds like someone breaking in!
Just a storm, Dick. Sit down.
He had them wiretapping into phone calls. They found out that he did that, and they tried to impeach him. He claimed that it never happened in the first place, said the famous lines, "I'm not a crook." Eventually we get this president named Ronald Reagan. He decides there's too many issues inside the country. Very charismatic man. He is an actor and a singer. He won by the biggest landslide ever. Gorbachev, being one of the higher-ups, became like his best friend. And eventually they came to the agreement that this wall right here, even though it was after Reagan's presidency, they came to the agreement that wall needed to come down. A few years later, the Soviet Union fell and collapsed, and that marked the end of them. So the biggest issues of the modern day, I'm not going to cover because they're so politically charged. I think that is a very good telling of history from the American perspective.